Hello, everybody. I am Mrs. Poppet, and this is my place. I'm so glad you decided to come back for the next part of our story, The Snow Queen. Today I will read to you part 3, and things start to get really exciting. The third story, The Flower Garden of a Woman Who Could Conjure. But how fated little Gerda during Kay's absence? What had become of him? No one knew, nor could anyone give the slightest information, except for the boys, who said that he had tied his sled to another very large one, which had driven through the street and out the town gate. Nobody knew where it went. Many tears were shed for poor Kay, and little Gerda wept bitterly for a very long time. She said she knew he must be dead, that he was drowned in the river which flowed close to the school. Oh, indeed, those long winter days were very dreary. But at last spring came, and with it warm sunshine. "Kay is dead and gone," said little Gerda. "I don't believe it," said the sunshine. "He is dead and gone," she said to the sparrows. "We don't believe it," they replied, and at last little Gerda began to doubt it herself. "I will put on my new red shoes," she said one morning, "those that Kay has never seen, and then I will go down to the river and ask for him." It was quite early when she kissed her old grandmother, who was still asleep. Then she put on her red shoes and went quite alone out the town gates towards the river. "Is it true you have taken my little playmate from me?" she said to the river. "I will give you my red shoes if you'll give them back to me." And it seemed as if the waves nodded to her in a very strange manner. Then she took off her red shoes, which she liked better than anything else, and threw them both into the river. But they fell near the bank, and the little waves carried them back to the land, just as if the river would not take from her what she loved best, because they could not give her back little Kay. But she thought that she had not thrown the shoes out far enough, so she crept into a little boat and lay among the reeds and threw the shoes again, farther from the end of the boat into the water. But the boat was not fastened. Her movement sent it gliding away from land. When she saw this, she hastened to reach the end of the boat, but before she could do it, she was more than a yard from the bank, and drifting faster away. Then little Gerda was very much frightened, and began to cry, but no one heard her except the sparrows, and they could not carry her to land, although they flew along the shore and sang as if to comfort her, "Here we are, here we are." The boat floated with the stream. Little Gerda sat quite still with her only stocking on her feet, and the red shoes floated after her, but she could not reach them, because the boat kept so far ahead. The banks on each side of the river were very pretty. There were beautiful flowers and old trees and sloping fields in which cows and sheep were grazing, but not a man was to be seen. "Perhaps the river will carry me to little Kay," thought Gerda, and then she became more cheerful and raised her head and looked at the beautiful green banks, and so the sailboat sailed on for hours. At length she came to a large cherry orchard, in which stood a small red house, with strange red and blue windows. It also had a thatched roof, and outside were 2 wooden soldiers that presented arms as she sailed past. Gerda called out to them, for she thought they were alive, but of course they did not answer, and the boat drifted nearer to the shore, and she saw what they really were. Then Gerda called still louder, and there came a very old woman out of the house, leaning on a crutch. She wore a large hat to shade her from the sun, and on it were painted all sorts of pretty flowers. "Oh, you poor child," said the old woman. "How did you manage to come all this distance in the wide world on such a rapidly rolling stream?" And then the old woman walked in the water, seized the boat with her crutch, and threw it to the land, and lifted Gerda out. And Gerda was glad to feel herself on dry ground again, although she was rather afraid of the strange old woman. "Come and tell me who you are," she she said, and how you came to be here." Then Gerda told her everything while the old woman shook her head and said, "Hmm." And when she had finished, Gerda asked if she had not seen little Kay, and the old woman told her he had not passed by that way, but he was very likely would come. So she told Gerda not to be sorrowful, but to taste the cherries and look at the flowers. They were better than any picture book, for each of them could tell a story. Then she took Gerda by the hand and led her into the little house, and the old woman closed the door. The windows were very high, and as the panes were red and blue and yellow, the daylight shone through them in all sorts of singular colors. On the table were some beautiful cherries, and Gerda had permission to eat as many as she would like. While she was eating them, the old woman combed out her long flaxen ringlets with a golden comb, and the glossy curls hung down on each side of her round, pleasant face, which looked fresh and blooming as a rose. "I have been wishing for a dear little maiden like you," said the old woman, "and now you must stay with me and see how happily we shall live together." And while she went on combing little Gerda's hair, the little girl thought less and less about her adopted brother, Kay, for the old woman could conjure, and although she was not a wicked witch, she conjured only a little for her own amusement, and now because she wanted to keep Gerda. Therefore she went into the garden and stretched out her crutch towards all the rose trees, beautiful though they were, and they immediately sank into the dark earth, so that no one could tell where they had once stood. The old woman was afraid that if Gerda saw the roses, she would think of those at home, and then remember little Kay and run away. Then she took Gerda into the flower garden. How fragrant and beautiful it was! Every flower that could be thought of for every season of the year was here, in bloom. No picture book could have more beautiful colors. Gerda jumped for joy and played till the sun went down behind the tall cherry trees, and then she slept in an elegant bed with red silk pillows embroidered with the colors violets, and dreamed as pleasantly as a queen on her wedding day. The next day, and for many days after, Gerda played with the flowers in the warm sunshine. She knew every flower, yet although there were so many of them, it seemed as if one was missing. But what it was she could not tell. One day, however, she sat looking at the old woman's hat with the painted flowers on it, and she saw that the prettiest of all of them was a rose. The old woman had forgotten to take it from her hat when she made all the roses sink into the earth, but it is difficult to keep thoughts together in everything. One mistake upsets all our arrangements. "What, are there no roses here?" cried Gerda, and she ran out to the garden, examined all the beds, and searched and searched. There was not one to be found. Then she sat down and wept. Her tears fell just on the place where one of the rose trees had sunken down. The warm tears moistened the earth, and the rose tree sprouted up at once, blooming as it once did before it had sunk. And Gerda embraced it and kissed the roses, and thought of the beautiful roses at home, and then of little Kay. "Oh, how I have been detained," said the little maiden. "I wanted to seek for little Kay. Do you know where he is?" she asked the roses. "Do you think he will be dead?" And the roses answered, "No, he is not dead. We have been in the ground where all the dead lie, but Kay is not there." "Thank you," said little Gerda, and then she went to the other flowers and looked into their little cups and asked, "Do you know where little Kay is?" But each flower, as it stood in the sunshine, dreamed only of its own little fairy tale of history. Not one knew anything of Kay. Gerda heard many stories from the flowers, and she asked them one after another about him. And what did the tiger lily say? "Hark, do you hear the drum? Turn, turn, there's only notes, always turn, turn. Listen to the woman's song of mourning. Here lie the cry of the priest. In her long robe red stands a Hindu widow now. By the funeral pile the flames rise high around her, and she places herself on the dead body of her husband. But the Hindu woman is thinking of living in that one circle, of him, of her son, who lighted those flames. Those shining eyes troubled her heart more painfully than the flames which will soon consume her body to ashes. Can the fire of the heart be extinguished in the flames of the funeral pyre? I don't understand that at all, said little Gerda. That is my story, said the tiger lily. What said the convolvulus? Near yonder narrow road stands an old knight's castle. Thick ivy creeps over the ruined walls, leaf over leaf, even to the balcony in which stands a beautiful maiden. She bends over the balustrades and looks up the road. No rose on its stem is fresher than she. No apple blossom wafted by the wind floats more lightly than she moves. Her rich silk rustles as she bends over and examines. Will he not come? Is it Kay you mean? Asked Gerda. I am only speaking the story of my dreams, replied the flower. What said the little snowdrop? Between two trees is a rope hanging. There's a piece of board on it. It's a swing. Two little girls swing, dressed in white as snow, with long green ribbons fluttering from their hats, are sitting on it swinging. Their brother, who is taller than they are, stands in the swing. He has one arm around the rope to steady himself, and in one hand he holds a little bowl, in the other a clay pipe, and he is blowing bubbles. As the swing gate goes on, the bubbles fly upward, reflecting the most beautiful varying colors. The last one still hangs from the bowl of the pipe and sways in the wind. On it goes the swing, and then the little black dog comes running up. He's almost as light as a bubble. Then he raises himself on his hind legs and wants to be taken into the swing, but it does not stop, and the dog falls. Then he barks, bark, bark, gets angry. The girls scoop towards him, and the bubble bursts. A swinging plank, a light sparkling foam picture. That is my story. It may be all very pretty what you are telling me, says little Gerda, but you speak so mournfully, and you do not mention little Kay at all. What do the hyacinths say? There were 3 beautiful sisters, fair and delicate. The dress of one was red, the second blue, and the third of pure white. Hand in hand they danced in the bright moonlight by the calm lake, but they were human beings, not fairy elves. The sweet fragrance attracted them, and they disappeared into the wood. Here the fragrance became stronger. 3 coffins in which lay 3 beautiful maidens glided from the thickest part of the forest across the lake. The fireflies flew lightly over them like little floating torches. Do the dancing maidens sleep, or are they dead? The scent of the flower says they are corpses. The evening bell tolls their knell. You make me quite sorrowful, said little Gerda. Your perfume is so strong, you make me think of the dead maidens. Ah, is little Kay really dead then? The roses have been in the earth, and they say no. Cling, clang, tolled the hyacinth bells. We are not tolling for little Kay. We do not know him. We sing our song, and it's the only one we know. Kay, we do not know. Then Gerda went to the buttercups that was glittering among the bright green leaves. You are pretty little sons, said Gerda. Tell me if you know where I can find my fellow playmate. And the buttercups sparkled gaily and looked at Gerda with a song. Which song would the buttercups sing? But it was not about Kay. The bright warm sun rose on a little court on the first warm day of spring. His bright beams rested on white walls of neighboring houses, and close by bloomed the first yellow flower of the season, glittering like gold in the sun's warm ray. An old woman sat in her armchair at the house of the door, and the granddaughter, poor and pretty servant, came to see her for a short visit. When she kissed her grandmother, there was gold everywhere, the gold of the hearth and that holy kiss. It was a golden morning, and there was gold in the beams of sunlight, gold in the leaves of the lowly flower, and on the lips of the maiden. There, that is my story, said the buttercup. My poor old grandmother, said Gerda. She is longing to see me, grieving for me, as she did for little Kay. But I shall soon go home now, and take little Kay with me. It's no use asking the flowers. They know only their own songs, and can give me no information. And then she tucked up her little dress, that she might run faster, but the narcissus caught her by the leg as she was jumping over it, and she stopped to look at the tall yellow flower and said, Perhaps you may know something? Then she stooped down quite close to the flower and listened, and what did he say? I can see myself, said the narcissus. Oh, how sweet is my perfume! Up in a little room with a bow window stands a little dancing girl, half undressed. She stands sometimes on one leg, sometimes on both, and looks as if she would tread the whole world under her feet. She is nothing but an illusion. She is pouring water out of a teapot onto some piece of stuff which she holds in her hand. It is her bodice. Cleanliness is a good thing, she says, her white dress hanging on a peg. It also has been washed in the teapot and dried on the roof. She puts it on, ties a saffron-colored handkerchief around her neck, which makes the dress look whiter. See how she stretches out her leg as if she was showing off on a stem. I can see it myself. What do I care for all that? Said Gerda. You need not tell me such a story. And she ran to the other end of the garden. The door was fastened, but she pressed against the rusty latch, and it gave way. The door sprang open, but little Gerda ran out with bare feet into the wide world. She looked back 3 times, but no one seemed to be following her. At last she could run no longer, so she sat down to rest on a great stone. And when she looked around, she saw summer was over, and autumn was very far advanced. She had known nothing of this in the beautiful garden, where the sun shone and the flowers grew all year round. Oh, how I've wasted my time, said little Gerda. It is autumn. I must rest no longer. And she rose up to go on, but her little feet were wounded and sore, and everything around her looked so cold and bleak. The long willows leaves were quite yellow. The dewdrops fell like water. Leaf after leaf dropped from the trees. The sloe thorn alone bore fruit, but the sloe were sour and set the teeth on edge. Oh, how dark and dreary the world looked. Well, that's part 3, everybody. Isn't it exciting how little Gerda got brave and decided to go out and look for her little playmate? She must have really loved him a whole lot. Of course, it's not always a good idea to go out by yourself, but little Gerda really loved little Kay. Anyway, tomorrow we'll continue the story, and I can't wait to see you then. Bye!